I think we'll start officially. Are we all good to go?
Absolutely. I've got my coffee. You got your brew?
Yes, I was going to do tea, and then I made myself a coffee because I thought you can't drink tea talking about cycling. There must be a rule of the Velomati.
And no doubt an appropriate type of coffee as well. That I'm sure I've broken it somehow.
Well, do you know what? It's the best thing we bought by accident just before the first lockdown. It was a bean to cup machine. It's just been
Right.
absolutely a wonderment.
Yeah.
It's been a
Yeah. No, I've
wonderment.
ended up on another subscription. I hate to think how many subscriptions I've now got through lockdown from alcohol to coffee and various other things. But yeah, it's another one of those things that the doorbell rings and a pack arrives to get me through the week.
Oh yeah. Just a slight deviation before we properly start. It's probably people are tuning in thinking, "What's this nutter talking about?" But is it just me? But if you do a group ride on Zwift and you look at the chat, I think, well, I have an odd drink now and again, but I think there's some people on there that do drink a lot.
What while they're riding on the group
Yeah,
ride?
well, some people have been like, just enjoying a beer, or it's, oh, my legs are sore today after how much I drank last night. It's like, what?
Well, I couldn't possibly comment, Dave, because as I'm sitting here right now in my pain cave slash office, sitting behind me is something called a pinter, this homebrew kit that I've got, which enables me to literally swing on my chair and pour myself an IPA. So I couldn't possibly comment.
It must. I did see somewhere. God knows who sponsored it, but they reckon beer was a better recovery drink than most commercial recovery drinks. But
I
yeah,
think we've convinced ourselves of that, haven't we? Particularly on
yeah,
Belgian.
yeah. Yeah, convenient sites. But Simon Miller, welcome to Titanium Geek, and thanks so much for doing this, and I really appreciate it. So, we should just like, obviously, because this at some point will go out on something more than just stereo that more people listen to. Can you just give everybody just a bit of an introduction into yourself and who you are and where you are and all that sort of stuff, please?
Yeah, yeah. Well, firstly, thanks very much for having me. And yeah, so Simon Miller, I'm a member of the Southborough and District Wheelers Cycling Club, which is a regional cycling club based in Tunbridge Wells, Kent, in the UK. For your non-UK listeners, that's about an hour or so south of London. And we're a pretty large club. We've got sort of around approaching 300 members, which for a small town, that's a big club. But a club with a lot of history. We go back to, I think, 1932. And if you Google us and have a look at our website, fantastic plotted history and amazing photos going back to that era of our club. So we're a very active cycling club based down here in a beautiful part of the world. And I guess recently, like a lot of other clubs, we've been fully embracing the online circuit cycling world across a few different platforms. And that's perhaps raised the profile of the club and taken us to regions we didn't think we'd be exposed to beforehand in terms of who we're racing with and how we're keeping ourselves busy now in the evenings and on the weekends.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, just going back, 1930s. I'm just thinking I know Tunbridge Wells. I used to go down there quite a bit once upon a time and work in beautiful, beautiful place. So is it classed as a town or a city, Simon?
It's a town. It's a town. I think is it around about? Oh, I'm trying to remember the population now, but it's not a huge population. I think is it around 150,000. He says as he googles quickly in the background. But it's not huge. 120,000. There we go. Thanks, Google. Yeah, it's not huge. So our membership, given our area, is pretty impressive, I think, actually. But it's a lovely part of the world. We've from our club rides on a weekend. We get a good turn up in the spring and the summer, maybe 40, sometimes up to 50 of us on club rides, split out into different speed groups and gruppettos, and we'll go off to sort of 50, 60-mile rides. It could take us through the forests, through the hills of the Wealds, down towards sort of Brighton, Ditchling Beacon. I'll get that one right. Around the coastline. We're really spoiled with the Kent and the East Sussex countryside around our area. So nice place to be riding.
It is. Yeah, it is beautiful. Ditchling Beacon, of course, famous for the London to Brighton cycle ride, if I remember right.
Yeah, for that and a few grueling hill climb events. We had a few of our riders in the Tour of Sussex recently taking that on and challenging. I think Kwiatkowski's still got the King of the Mountains on there. So yeah, it's had some pretty elite riders taking that one on.
I didn't know that. Crikey! I used to go and visit a bloke in a former role, and they had a house that just overlooked the Ditchling Beacon. It was just beautiful, you know, and so
Yeah.
close to London in a lot of respects.
Well, and that whole South Downs way there from Eastbourne to Winchester is just beautiful. I mean, a large part of our club are into off-road riding as well. We're very active with cyclocross, cross country, adventure riding as well, and to have that on the doorstep to ride all of it if you're brave enough, which I was fortunate enough to do last year. Or to just break into little chunks of it along the South Downs Way. It's an amazing route to have on your doorstep.
Yeah, certainly is. Crikey. Crikey. So 1930s, just on a lot of the original cycling clubs, they used to have the most beautiful trophies. So how have you managed to keep hold of those?
Yeah, in fact, yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, last year, of course, we weren't able to award many of those, but normally we have a wonderful annual sort of dinner and awards night, and some of those trophies go back with names stamped well into the 30s and 40s. In fact, I'm looking at one right now as he takes it off the shelf in front of me that I was delighted to be awarded with last year myself, which was the sort of services to the club in light of what we've done with online cycling. And I'm looking at that one now, and that goes back to 1950 with some wonderful names on it. So yeah, fantastic history. And the great thing is a lot of members from that era who were setting records back in the 60s are still very active within the club. So it's a club that's got a racing pedigree, but also a fantastic community as well. And from the club rides to our infamous Wednesday Wobblers, retirees coffee and cake ride. We've still got a lot of those people very actively involved on the committee, on the rides, in the social events. So it's something we're very keen to keep going. And in actual fact, next year is our 90th anniversary. We're just starting to have conversations now about how we might be able to sort of celebrate that and how open the council might be to some sort of festival or town crit or something like that, which of course becomes increasingly difficult to do these days with insurance and liabilities and things, but we'll give it a go.
Oh God, yeah. Best of luck there. I've organised a town crit years ago. God Almighty, yeah, and that was before all these insurance rules. So, yeah, no, let's hope they can do it for you. So before the pandemic, what sort of events did the 300 members get involved in?
Yeah, so there's the certainly at the pointy end, the sort of racing end of the club. It's across all disciplines. So we've got very active time trial section, both in terms of club time trials, road bike categories, but also people competing at a national level across all sort of distances. In 2019. Philippa Jenkins from our club, she actually came fourth in the national 24 hours. So we've got people competing in that level. I think, was it about 460 miles she covered in 24 hours? And that broke actually our male record, which had gone back to 79 or 1980, if I remember correctly. So we've got people doing mad stuff like that. We've got people racing at the sort of elite and Cat 1 road racing level, circuit racing level as well. People taking part in cyclocross at a national level. So there's very much a pointy end to what we do, but the heart of what we do, and to your question before lockdown, was very much around the club ride activity, the sportives, the youth section, which is absolutely thriving, particularly within cyclocross. But also a local crits at the park and at the cyclo park facility we have down here in Kent. So really a broad cross section across all disciplines, and I think that's what makes it great. Really, it's not really about any one thing. So a really vibrant and active club.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really good. So so lockdown comes along.
Yes.
you know, and I'm sure, like you, probably like me, we were on the BC. It used to be, I always say BCF. You know, I know it's British Cycling now, but the BC website, trying to work out what the latest guidance is. Can we ride in the 60s or not? Coach rides and all that sort of stuff, and having to fathom that out. And then obviously people started discovering online cycling like never before. You know, because in the past I was the weirdo that turned up at Derby track wearing a Zwift kit. Nobody had heard of it. So,
yeah, headbands on, headbands on.
Yeah, they're like, what is this knobhead doing? So, for you guys, then, how did you transition your membership onto online cycling platforms like Zwift and RGT?
Yeah, it kind of happened organically initially. It wasn't, we obviously didn't plan for this, didn't know what was coming. I mean, there were a lot of us on various platforms beforehand, from Ruby to, Sufferfest, Zwift, all the various platforms. And, if you followed our Club Strava feed, you'd see lots of online rides popping up. But I think the difference was none of that was coordinated. I don't think we were riding together. So I think what lockdown brought all of a sudden is, we needed to find a replacement for our club rides, our Sunday morning club rides, as I say, would attract, anywhere 30, 40, 50, 60 people, which wasn't just about riding, but it was around our social, it was around our banter, our friendships. So I think the first thing that happened, the first wave of lockdown, just prompted getting together initially on the Zwift platform, the group rides, and just trying to emulate that as much as possible for people that did have trainers. So that was the first sort of phase. Let's get those going, and we had regular meetups around those. And at that stage, I don't think many of the community had actually taken part in online racing. A few of us had, and we were kind of coaxing a few others into it. But I guess the real stepping point was when British Cycling Southeast, in late Feb, I think, and into March, organised a local club series, a Zwift-based series. And we said, hey, let's get involved in that. And that ran over, I can't remember how many weeks it was. I think it might have been almost 11 or 12 weeks. And by the end of it, we had 60 members of our club actively racing. And as I say, a lot of these people had never raced on Zwift before, or raced in real life. The idea of sort of turning up to a grid and jumping out, 500-600 watts straight out of the gates was a very fun. But it was fantastic. So we had all these people involved, and we were competing against some very big London clubs, and I think we surprised ourselves. We ended up was it third in that first series, and that really catapulted from there. A second series followed, and we ended up winning it on the final race of the season. So I think that captured the imagination, not just of those that we managed to get involved, but also to the rest of the club, who perhaps hadn't considered online cycling before. They saw what we're doing, and now we've got well over 100 of our members and a few friends of the club and ex-members, and I think that's been the great thing too. People who've moved away from the club have rejoined us to be part of this now, and we've got over 100 of us sort of registered within our e-racing Facebook group and on Zwift Power, and when we congregate, when we get ourselves coordinated, we can end up getting sort of 30, 40, 50 of those together in a particular series or event, as we're doing in a few now. So that's really how it sort of grew. And I guess in the second, we then had summer, and of course lockdown eased, and a lot of us went back outside. And then I guess the next chapter was as we came into autumn and the later lockdowns, and again that's sort of organically grown again and diversified. So we're now very active across a few different platforms, predominantly RGT and Zwift, and as that population has grown as well, we're also catering for quite a few different needs. Not everybody wants to do the extreme sort of Zwift Racing League type racing at that end with that pressure. Some just want to do group rides, and the community's big enough now that we can cater for quite a few different types of events.
Oh, that's really good. So normally then, I'm just thinking about it. So the 300 members pre-pandemic, how did you communicate as a group? Was it Facebook, WhatsApp, or websites?
Yeah,
And as
we perhaps, as a club, haven't fully embraced a lot of the channels that perhaps we're now using within the online community, and I think that's just due to online or digital familiarity. You know, we've got a broad age group within our group, and you know, a lot of us wouldn't have even known of Discord. I certainly didn't, other than through my kids and their gaming beforehand. So, you know, we weren't necessarily leveraging Discord, or certainly not even platforms like this beforehand. So Facebook was the main one. Then you get lots of messenger groups and WhatsApp groups for various little pockets beneath that. But email, website, and Facebook was the main form of comms, and that seemed to work well. I think maybe now, having explored some of the other channels through the online activity, I think that's providing a good prompt for our wider club to reconsider its communications plan and how we support people who aren't maybe turning up to those events as well. Because I think one of the important things that's come out of all this as well is just the value of the banter, the social connection, whether you're riding or not. And I think it's prompted us to think about how do we engage the full club, not just the people who turn up to races or turn up to group rides. So a lot of good to come from this on that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for anybody who listens to this who's not a member of a cycling club, I just encourage you to become a member. You know, wherever in the world you are, become a member of a cycling club. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think the sheer sort of joy that you get from, as you know, going to be riding out with a load of mates, going to a cafe, sitting down with a piece of cake and a coffee, having a good old banter, and then riding back, I just think is just wonderful. And, you know,
yeah,
however great it is for sitting for 2 hours on, you know, a cycling platform, you know, it's good for producing watts, but I don't think it's, you know, for mental well-being, it doesn't seem to be anywhere near that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the cross section of people, right? You know, within the rest of your life, you mix with similar people because, you know, you like people because they're like you, or you work with similar like-minded people. Within the cycling club, it's such a broad cross section. I think it opens your eyes up a bit. It takes you back off your pedestal a little bit to consider other viewpoints and, you know, engage in different conversations, make new connections. And when I first joined our club, I was perhaps a little bit daunted or intimidated. First of all, we had a dedicated sort of cycling cafe in town, and I used to go past there and I saw all these people in this kit and, you know, the odd skin suit now and again and things like this. Well, that looks a bit daunting. But actually, it was anything but that once I was introduced and got involved. And of course, I was dropped like mad on the hills on the first few rides, but quite quickly you build your confidence, build your speed up, and there's a group to cater for everybody. But I thoroughly encourage it. I know we're probably preaching to the converted with our audience here, but you know, maybe that's something good to come out of all this, that more people do sort of seek out those communities and those groups beyond their normal areas of comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at the events then, so what sort of events are you putting on at the moment and for the club, and which platforms are you using?
Yeah, well, we've still got a very strong Zwift pace, which obviously, you know, that's where the masses are. And so with that, we're very active within the Zwift Racing League, which is now within its second series. I think there was something quoted like 1,700 teams in this globally now, over 8,000 people, which brings with it its own problems and challenges. But we've got, I think at last count, we've got 8 teams racing in that, of 6 riders and a couple on the bench each. So over 50 people sort of actively engaged and signed up for that series and doing very well. And that's across A, B and C categories. I think our top team is knocking on the door, or will be shortly on, we hope, maybe a Premier League invite. So we're catering at that sort of elite level, but doing strongly across the other categories as well. So that's keeping us very busy at the moment. We're also involved in, we really like the team time trial format, despite its clunkiness on the Zwift platform. But the WTRL guys do a great job despite that. So we regularly get turn-ups for that on the Thursday nights. And we've also just had some great youth engagement in the Veganuary series as well, which has been brilliantly run. And our youth team racing in the D category ended up winning that. So we've got 8-year-olds
Wow.
9-year-olds, 10-year-olds racing in that, which is amazing to see. Obviously, they've got the weight advantage within that, but I think that's the wonderful thing about this. It all balances out to a large degree with the watts per kilo. So we've got that going on as well in Zwift, as well as the group rides, the Mad Monday series throughout January. So lots going on there. But what we've given more attention to over the last few months has been RGT, which is really engaging us with something different, and that it appeals to us in a different way. So I think a few of us had tried it out in the past. My toe in the water was with the cycling podcast, Giro Series, where I think Mike Lister mentioned similar for him last week.
Oh, yes.
And I gave that a go last year, and to be honest, I don't think I gave it a fair chance. I had a few connection issues, and I was probably wrapped up in this stuff at the time. So I did a few events, and then I sort of went away. And it wasn't until sort of autumn again that I dipped back into it, and quite a bit had developed since, and some great routes. And then more recently, I think the thing we really rallied around was the fantastic Tour de Mons series that James Ogilvy and Samir and the team put on, and Mike as well. And that was fantastic. So that was how many stages was it in the end? Was it 12 stages over 16 days? And epic stages. So a proper stage race. And we'd never done anything like that before. And we kind of just, put it out into our group, who's up for this? And we thought, I don't think we'll get many take-ups to this. But we did. We ended up having, I think we had about 10 people committed to virtually the full series. A few dipped in and out there. And we absolutely loved it. The routes, the community, the banter, the team aspect. By the last stage, we were all working together to get our top place finisher as high as we could in the GC. And things have really sort of kicked on from there, really. So a long-winded answer to your question, but I think it's just we've got so much going on now, and it's almost hard to keep up with. There's so many series we all want to take part in and engage in, and what a blessed position we're in to have those options.
It's right. It's funny, I've just when you log in, I think I said last week to Mike, I'm so much going on in my life. I just grab an hour and jump on my bike and do whatever's available. But I won't talk about today's ride because it's dreadful. That was all down to me. That was all down to me. But when you log on now, there's just I think people said about RGT even 4 months ago. Let's say people say, "Oh, it's a bit quiet on RGT," and now there's a stack of events. And it's just so great to be able to click onto something, do chat laps or an easy ride or a pod event or whatever. I just think it's fabulous, really. And how do members cope with technology? So, for example, internet connection, getting older smart trainers and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has been a challenge, right? I mean, all of us now knew far too much about home networking and Bluetooth interference and we'd care for. Both through homeschooling challenges and online riding challenges. But, I think that is a real challenge, actually. I think it's a challenge for the sector of that next stage of growth, right? And how you get beyond the people like us who are prepared to persevere with those challenges and that troubleshooting because we really desire that goal versus the people who perhaps, the Peloton out of the box type approach appeals to because it just works in what it does, and not necessarily that those worlds need to come together, but in terms of next stage growth, I do think I can see it even within our own club. It's just too much hassle at times, software, hardware, connectivity, and of course everybody's setup is different. So although there are troubleshooting guides, as we see within the RGT forums and the Zwift forums, everybody tries to be helpful and diagnose the problem, but every setup and everybody's level of knowledge and ability in this is entirely different. And we've seen a few people that have given up, and a few people I think simply we won't be able to engage because that is just too much hassle. So personally, I've ended up finding a setup that works pretty reliably for me now. But I do sympathise with people who don't have that broadband connection, don't have the the PCs or the hardware, specs that we might have, and that might be a real barrier for growth, I think.
Yeah, you're right. I've had this discussion with another platform, and it's hard to describe really. And I just try to, I say as much as I'm sort of a bit of a geek myself. I'm not super geeky, and sometimes I just haven't got the time to think around a problem. So I just want to plug and play. I just think it's funny. I was listening. One of my favourite podcasts is This Week in Tech, which I think is the longest running podcast in the world, I think. But anyway, so one of the things, they had one of the top people from Microsoft on there, and she was saying that what's frustrating with Apple for Microsoft is every so often they come out with a product that even if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, you just can't resist. For example, it was the iPod, and then it's an iPad, and then it's the AirPods. It's like that, isn't it? The Apple TV 4K is just that brilliant piece of kit. So, it's absolutely fantastic. And people go, the control on it's a pain in the backside. But yeah, it is. But, you get used to it. And I think anybody who wants to scale a platform has got to get on that. And then, you're right. I was listening to, funnily enough, Shane Miller is on the Cycling Tips podcast, and they're interviewing him about the new plug-in Wahoo Kicker. And if anybody not seen the video that Shane's done as well with visiting YouTube and having a look, and he really takes a deep dive. But like he was explaining, that when you've got loads of devices in a house on 2.4 gigs, you're going to have dropouts and interference and all that sort of stuff. And he mentioned, perhaps 5 gig could be a bit of a solution to this going forward because there's not many people on there. And you go, perhaps not in Australia, mate. There's loads of people on it here, and that's and that you're right. That is the thing. It's like I pay £75 a month on the internet just so I can get really good business broadband here, just so I can connect, and it's all that sort of stuff. And I suppose for a lot of people where you might have a cyclist who's not very tech savvy and they want to plug in and get it to work, it must be quite difficult for them.
It's difficult and it's expensive, right? So let's take, for example, our youth section, and I think this is the bit where my perspective is I think the online cycling bit hasn't really catered for fully yet. And I think it's a massive opportunity, both from a well-being, a fitness, but also a developmental point of view for youth cycling. But, if I'm a parent who's not particularly into cycling and not tech savvy, for me to get my head around the jargon, the lingo, the platforms, the connectivity requirements to get my son or daughter set up, plus the cost of that, plus the cost of the turbo trainer, there's still some big barriers here to mass adoption, and a real challenge. Plus, then the frustrations. I mean, if we could have recorded a couple of our youth riders when they've been dropped out, in their series, when they've had a dropout halfway through a race when they've been leading, that's if you think you've seen doors slam before, then there's some major family domestics. So, I think there are some challenges, and I do wonder if the industry and we've kind of got away with it slightly because a lot of us have had a bit more time on our hands to persevere through lockdown to oversee this. But in the normal world, I don't have the time to be on the forums constantly. I just want to get on my bike and ride. And when you're trying to cater for a community and embrace a community as well, that's a lot of admin responsibility. And if you think when you join these platforms now, there's a lot of connecting the dots that you've got to do. I mean, it's wonderful that these platforms are open platforms, right? But when you've got to join 4 Facebook groups, connect this to this, and hold on, where does this bit fit in? And what's this thing called Swift Power or RGTDP and Magic Roads? And, it makes sense to me. But how do I embrace somebody who that's totally alien to when all they want to do is just plug in and ride? So it would be interesting to see how things develop in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just, you've just nudged me on something, and you probably inspired me to do something, Simon, really, because I was looking at Tim Searle on who's, does anybody do any more miles on Zwift than Tim? And I noticed he's puts in his Strava rides. If anybody, he puts in the comments underneath his ride, if anybody needs any help getting set up, please contact me, which I think is such a brilliant thing. And perhaps that's what we need. We need more sort of connectivity ambassadors. I know there's a really good friend of mine lives not far from here in the Midlands, and he's a multiple Masters world champion. He's in his 70s, and put it this way, I often say to people, and this isn't far off the truth, you can go around his house in winter, you can have a really good conversation, but when you step out, you've got hypothermia. And so he doesn't do heating. He's got a cooker that doesn't work. He's only just got his first car in ages, and that was just so he could get to the track at Derby. He didn't have a mobile phone. So you probably was one of the only people left in existence who was sort of like, no debit card. It was off grid. Right. But he's now riding online. And the reason is there was a local club cyclist went round. There was two. One set him up. One of the coaches from Derby set him up on the internet and just did all the paperwork and got him on a BT router and all that sort of stuff. So, I think he also got him an iPad from a local auction site. And another cyclist went round, took him out to buy him a smart trainer, plugged it all in, did all the connectivity, and got him running right at the start of the pandemic. And he's regularly on the platforms now racing. Absolutely loves it. And he was the last person. So perhaps we need more of us that are willing to go out, subject to local lockdown rules, and to help people out. That's the only way of doing it. Perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps so. And I think it's one of the excellent things about the RGT community, to be quite honest, is the role that those official or unofficial ambassadors play, the people like the Tim Sinclairs of helping out, is incredible, absolutely invaluable. So I mean, that's one of the things we've really enjoyed as a club on RGT is that open, supportive and friendly community. And you've only got to look into some of the forums that we jokingly call the bear pits of some of the other platforms and some of the animosity and behaviour in there. And I think that's a really interesting thing about how these platforms grow. I think it may be as much around what the actual platform does as around the nature of the community around it, because that's what we look for in these things, right? We look for interaction, we look for support, we look for mental well-being as well as physical well-being, and you don't want to come away from a race, being shouted at for suspect sandbagging and things like this if you clearly feel you're not. Some of those things can get very, very aggressive, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how these communities are moderated to overcome some of that, and not disrupt some of that, appeal.
Yeah. I notice there's one that pops up on my Facebook feed of one of let's just say it's cyclists of a certain age that have recently discovered racing on Zwift meetups, and there's some people take it for what it is, and some people who just take it far too seriously. And you've got to wonder how healthy that is. I know it's great to have great data. Interestingly enough, I heard today there's been two more, shall we say, higher profile cyclists caught for, one very high profile now, caught for cheating in Zwift racing, which is bloody marvellous that people are getting caught who, definitely cheating. But I just think if people, again, taking it over seriously, racing at a low level, as long as the data's, clean and honest and all that sort of stuff, which it should be, but then they're getting a bit et up about it all. That's not healthy, particularly if they start shouting on the internet.
And look, we all know that different turbos act in different ways, different power meters act in different ways. We all know it's not perfect calibration. But it's one of the things I've quite enjoyed on RGT, to be honest, is because of the lack of categorization, it sort of takes some of the focus off of that. And actually it faces it more about competing against you and competing against those around you. And in actual fact, I've, knowing in an open category race on RGT that I'm not going to be right up at the front, I actually take more pride in terms of winning my little battle within my group, or working as a group to bridge a gap, or even better, I love finishing, if I do finish higher up, looking at the results, and did I finish 10th but have a way better efficiency than people around me? I wasn't having to work so hard because I rode a little bit more intelligently or used the draft, and I quite like that. And no doubt RGT will as it grows, have to address that categorization challenge in some way, because it will need to sort of people will want to try and compete for wins at their level. But it's been very refreshing having immersed ourselves in Zwift over the last year, and some of those challenges around categorization to come back into something where you just focus on the riding a little bit more, and it's been really enjoyable.
Yeah, it is. I think, I interviewed on, I think it's on YouTube, Robin Zund, who's the captain of the famous KISS racing team on Zwift anyway. So top guy. And like Robin's frustration is, as much as he races, which he races a lot, it's the watts per kilogram thing. I think for a lot of it seemed like a good idea at the time, 6 years ago, and now you realise, you can see why outdoors in real life, why there's a point system. It's just, for me, it makes, so we all know people who've raced at a really high level and then take a year out on a BC license, and then they appear a year later in Cat 4, let's say, and they'll do a few fishing chippers and get a few easy wins, and then they start climbing back up the points again. And that for me, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. You think I can understand do that, because you probably you've had a kid and you can't afford to race, and you haven't got time and all that sort of stuff, and then you make your way back. But of course, on watts per kilogram thing, they're more or less forced to pop back in at AA plus again, and they might be at C with a bit of timber on themselves, and they want to get back again. And I think my plea to RGT is just have a point system, please, and that would be marvellous.
Yeah, I think meritocracy is probably the way to go with that. I mean, I think any system's going to have its issues, but I think the nice thing now is, with the growth of the other platforms, the full gas, the RGTs, is I think we'll see a few different approaches, and some will appeal to some, and some will appeal to others, depending on what they're aspiring to, and it's great to have those options. I mean, interestingly, I did see, I think it was on the UCI events on Zwift, and maybe on the Premier League, that they are bringing in an efficiency score on their broadcast now. I think that's good. So maybe that's a sign of where they're starting to go, and whether that sort of starts to filter down to the levels that we ride at. But I do think that's very much part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it just us talking about it just shows how far it's come from, plugging in a wheel on turbo trainer with a just about accurate power meter and seeing yourself pedaling around on a screen, and then waving to anybody else you see on there, because it's quite an unusual sight. And then the countdown clock on the screen we had to import in the early days of Zwift racing, and all that sort of stuff. So we all started at the same time to what it is now, and what RGT are doing. It's terrific. I'm waiting for the latest code drop on Veloton, because Tam Burns keeps telling me that's going to be, because I don't know. Have you managed to have a go with Veloton yet?
No, I haven't. No, I saw your article on Titanium Geek on the website, and it perked my curiosity. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing to ride. I mean, I've got to say, it is really amazing to ride. But when you're riding against, what gets me about it is the aggressiveness. So for example, let's say you do an elimination race. What I was talking about Mike about last week. You do an elimination race on RGT, and after a while, you've got a bit of an idea what everybody's going to do. But when you're racing against a load of bots, you haven't got a flipping clue. And these things keep racing off up the road and attacking. And it's like, oh my God, what are they up to? And you're like, I didn't sign up for this. And then at the end of it, you're absolutely knackered. And it is brilliant, really good. And I suppose that's going to be the great thing about it, which is, our view about M+1, about, just use any platform. I mean, you could ride Hustle City one day and Zwift another, and RGT another, and Veloton another. I mean, that's a great thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Thinking where it's all going to go. I mean, obviously, esports growth is just going to catapult, right? I mean, and you can see that in other categories. I was flicking through Sky Sports the other day and watching the EF1 on there, and I had to look twice to see whether it was a real thing or not. I mean, it's incredible. And of course, as this stuff gets televised, it gets advertised, money will start coming in. So it's only going to grow, but it's going to be interesting to see the paths different platforms take. There's obviously an appeal for some for a more gaming style. There's some for more racing and different types of racing. But the bit I'm interested in is, what that potential convergence with gaming looks like. What if EA Sports brought some of its worlds in, or Epic brought some of its worlds in? So you've got all these gaming platforms investing billions in terms of creating worlds. And I think we've seen, Shane Miller did an example of where you could sort of overlay onto Grand Theft Auto's world, I think. And I know some of this is a bit hypothetical now, and it might not be what we're looking for, you and I, in terms of our cycling platforms. But in terms of bringing in the youth and the kids, what does that start to look like when those worlds converge? So it's going to be fascinating over the next few years, but I can only see it growing and growing in many different ways. So I think it's great that there's something there for everybody. And yeah, I'm like you. I like dipping in and out of all of them.
Yeah, it is great. It's just talking to my son. He does a bit of mountain biking and stuff like that. And when I was testing Hustle City the other week, and he said, "What's this one all about?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just a courier for a day, and you just go around this city, and you can steer wherever you want to, and you get knocked off your bike, and you crash and everything." And he watched it, and he went, "This is awesome." And and he's had a go at the other ones, and he just goes, "Oh, they're all right." Doesn't engage him because he doesn't see the point in, cycling other than mountain biking. But when it's doing something like that, it just gets it. And then there's another mate who goes on Grand Theft Auto who said, "Oh, it's like amazing. You just pedal along and you can fire at cars and helicopters." You go, "What?" But like you say, it's different strokes for different folks, I suppose, and it's great we've got that.
Yeah, well, let's face it, we're a generation, of course, that grew up on Paperboy and Daley Thompson's Decathlon, isn't it? So, I mean, we do need it to come full circle. So when we've got a cycling game where we can throw papers out and score points as we go, I think we'll be satisfied as a generation, won't we?
I'm older than that. So it's crikey, yeah. Yeah, I remember when a mate of mine, I used to play in a band once upon a time, badly, and the guy who's the guitarist bought a computer shop, and we're like, "What's one of those?" And he started selling BBCs and Ataris and stuff like that, and Commodore 64s, and it was well weird. And being a Star Wars fan, there was a game called X-Wing I got really hooked on really quick, and then I bought I've got a Tesla. And you go on screen on the Tesla, and you go. I don't know if you've seen it. You go all the old Atari apps are on the Tesla, and when you play them, God, you realise how bad they were. Bloody hell, And I suppose that's the thing. You go into the cycling platforms we're on now. The graphics are flipping incredible.
Amazing.
Just on a bog standard computer. And that's an idea. So are you affiliated to Simon, to a local bike shop?
We support a few local bike shops actually, and mechanics. So we did used to have a regular meeting place that was a bike shop / cafe. That's unfortunately no longer with us. But we support a few locally actually, independent ones.
I was just going to say, because I suppose that's the solution they could do. I know bike shops. We all know quite a few bike shops that sell smart trainers when they can get them in and all that sort of stuff. But perhaps I'm just thinking, going back to what we were saying about parents who want to get the kids into indoor cycling, or people who aren't so tech savvy. Perhaps it's the bike shop that can offer that service as well. Wouldn't it be great? So you with your bike, you get an Apple TV, you get a flat screen wherever, and we come along and we set it up for you, and we advise you on your internet connection, and we fathom all that bit out, and we'll do it as a package.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that they're already having to become electronics experts over the last few years with Di2 and shifting. So the role of the bike shop and the mechanics knowledge and understanding has had to evolve significantly, and maybe it will be as much around connectivity. I know some of our mechanics might be absolutely saying no as they hear me say that, but you're right. There is a generation that will be looking for different things, and my kids who aren't avid cyclists, but who I've tried to get using Zwift, and it just doesn't appeal to them quite the same way. The badge hunting, maybe, they'll be looking for different things in it. But I'm also interested in the role that it could sort of just play in youth well-being in general. What role do cycling platforms have in schools for activity within gyms. You know, personally, I'd love to see something hooked up to the Xbox where my kids don't get their Xbox time. They earn their Xbox time by doing miles. You know, they earn their half an hour on it. You know, I mean, it'd be really interesting. I think convergence and integration is going to be really interesting over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You could cut out an element of the sort of cheating that goes on as well by using those platforms. All those devices. That'd be good. That's right. I mean, I've just go back to the mechanics. I think the mechanics are having to learn very quickly because of e-bikes now, and get the solder rounds out and all that sort of stuff. The percentage of sales. So no, that's really good. So right, I've had you for long enough. Sorry. So let's have a think. So if anybody listening, then Simon, tips for anybody who's listening to this who wants to get even better at doing events or racing, or they're a cycling club that haven't really embraced this. What sort of broad advice have you got for them?
So the first thing I'd say is just know your audience. You know, like any marketing and engagement. You know, what seems obvious to you can be totally alien to others. So be prepared to handhold people through the steps. Be careful not to use too much jargon and lingo, and you know, to the conversation earlier, if you can provide that sort of support service, a few ambassadors in your club. You know, we've now got one in our youth section. You know, to try and provide the examples and help people through. I think that's the biggest thing. Just don't assume people know where to start, what to do. And then the other aspect, as I said, you know, focus as much around the community, the communications, as you do around the races and the events themselves. And I guess the third bit would just be respecting and catering for different types of races and events. Not everybody wants to go out there and thrash it. Some will do. Some want training activities. Some want group rides. So if you've got a large enough community to sort of mix it up and support those different types of events, and just be very careful of not alienating or not catering for subgroups. You know, we've been really trying to actively embrace our ladies section, our youth section. You know, make sure that you sort of can try and cater for everyone in that. So those would be, you know, my parting words from our lessons learned. No rocket science there, but just easy to overlook when you get into the thrust of things. And then the final thing, you know, if you don't mind, Dave, is just a little plug actually for something that we're now doing. So in terms of exactly what I've said there, how do you cater for all the different needs? You know, we've just set up our own RGT series, which is going live next Friday the 12th. So that's our first attempt at an open series. That's called the Southborough and District Wheelers, or SDW Friday Frenzy series. So we'll be promoting that in the RTG forums, and hopefully with enough users that will pop up within the app as well as an icon. And what we're going to try and do is set up a couple of subcategories within there, both female, over 45s, youths, under 16s, and juniors, under 12s. So that kind of plays to my point earlier of how do we kind of encourage and engage those different audiences within the same series and event. So we'd welcome people joining that, giving us feedback as we go, and if you do, you know, give us a thumbs up while you're riding in that. We're really looking forward to that. That'll be our first attempt at sort of hosting our own series on the platform.
Oh, that's fantastic! Yeah, if you could have a category as well for people who are over 57, born in April, that'd be marvellous. So,
let's see what we can do.
But seriously, that's great. So if people want to find out more about that, they can go on to www.rgtdb.com, I think it is, and you can sign up. And then if you get 20 or more sign-ups, like you say, it appears in the app.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're, you know, if you can't find it there, then you know, find me in the forums. I'm Simon, SI space MON, in the Facebook forums. I'll send you the links. But also look out for our website as well, southborough-wheelers.co.uk, and we've got a dedicated page set up there, SDWFF, so southborough-wheelers.co.uk. /SDWFF. I appreciate that's a mouthful, but you'll find it. Google it. And we've got a race series page set up there, and we'll provide some links to that in the forums over the coming days.
That's brilliant, Simon. That's marvellous. Oh, just one last thing. If people want to find you, where can they find you?
Where can they
social
find me?
media. Yeah.
On social media. Well, as I say, on Facebook, you'll find me through the RGT and Zwift forums by searching for Space Mon. That's probably the easiest way to actually reach and find out to us, or through the Southborough Wheeler websites. I'll leave it at that rather than the random stuff I have within my various Instagram and the Twitter channels that might put people off. That's probably the most reliable ways.
That's fantastic, Simon. I really appreciate your time, and thanks so much for the absolutely great insight, and congratulations on all the wonderful things you've done with the club. I think that's inspiring for many people. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. It's been a pleasure to share it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Cheers, mate. Right, I'll end live now. There's about to press the button.
Brilliant. Have a good weekend, mate.
And you, mate. Thank you.